Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Midlands African Chamber and the Mac Foundation's Umoja Forum titled We Are One. I am Fidel Mienso, CEO at the Midlands African Chamber, and I have the honor of serving as your moderator for this important conversation centered on strengthening unity, collaboration, and mutual empowerment between African immigrants and African Americans. Today, we'll explore shared opportunities, collective challenges, and ways forward through five key lenses: general community and cultural unity, civic engagement, education, corporate, and generational wisdom. We are joined by an inspiring group of leaders, thinkers, and change makers. Let's start by introducing our panelists. First up, we have Reverend Brendan Whitaker. Reverend Whitaker is a passionate teacher and mentor dedicated to helping people develop a Christ-centered biblical worldview that informs every aspect of life. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Michigan and a Master of Arts in Theological Studies from Grace University. With nearly 2 decades of experience in telecommunications and over 15 years of experience in ministry, Reverend Whitaker bridges faith, work, and technology. He currently serves as the youth and young adult pastor at Salem Baptist Church and has taught theology courses, including the theology of work at Grace University. He and his wife, Daquisha, are proud parents of 2 sons, Brandon II, Deuce, and Elisha. Welcome. Next up, we have April Hibbler. April Hibbler is a respected strategist and advocate in Nebraska's small business ecosystem. She leads the Nebraska Opportunity Exchange at the Urban League Nebraska, where she has served over 300 small businesses and brought together 25 plus partners to create scalable access to procurement and capital. April previously worked with the SBA and holds a DD, an MBA, and LLM. Her passion is creating pathways that ensure every entrepreneur, especially those historically left out, has the tools to win. Welcome, April. Next up, we have Miss Candice Price, Candice Price is a mother of 2 girls, a visionary entrepreneur and community advocate committed to economic growth and social impact in Nebraska. Since moving to Omaha in 2009, she has led with purpose as the owner of Home Team Auto Sales and Sapphire Grow, and as the first person of color to serve on the board of Nebraska's Independent Auto Dealers Association. Honored as an admiral in the Great Navy of the state of Nebraska, Candice also co-founded the Legacy North Foundation and serves on several local and national boards. A licensed real estate broker, CNA, and University of Oklahoma graduate, she brings a multidisciplinary background shaped by early leadership at Union Pacific Railroad. Candice continues to champion small business development and equity across the region. Last but not least, we have our very own programs coordinator, Olaroaju Babalola. Ola Babalola is an entrepreneurial consultant and a champion for youth empowerment, dedicated to creating and supporting ecosystems that drive transformative change. He serves as the programs coordinator at the Midlands African Chamber, where he manages the Chamber's signature programs on workforce training and entrepreneurship support, while he also coordinates the Chamber supporting events to foster networking and community engagement. Ola previously worked with the NBDC as a business consultant and holds an MBA and a bachelor's degree in entrepreneurship. He seeks to use education and entrepreneurship to inspire and empower individuals to thrive. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming our panelists. Thank you all for joining me this evening. Are you all excited?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Awesome. To start off, let's talk about communities where relationships are built and change takes root. I'm going to address my first question to Candice. What are two specific ways African immigrants and African Americans can work together to strengthen cultural understanding and unity in our communities?
Thank you, Fidel. And I do just want to start by thanking Mac for making this conversation possible and for inviting me to be a part of the conversation. For that question, I think you actually kind of answered it even in your intro to it, and that's relationships. And it's really tough to build a relationship if you don't begin to get to know someone. So sometimes that means stepping outside of your comfort zone. One way is to intentionally go to events that the other culture is hosting or holding. It could be a large community event, or honestly, what works a bit better are the smaller intimate meetings, the smaller events where you can really share, you're comfortable getting to know someone and bring your kids along. Every time I have the opportunity, I bring my children with me to events because one thing for sure is that if we haven't gotten it right as the parents or adults, we can show our kids something different. So we can definitely begin to change things for the future. So that's one way. The other way is, simply when you're at home and on your own, as you're watching different shows on television, open yourself up to things that are outside of your norm or outside of your culture. There was a point in time where we didn't have streaming services, so we could only watch limited television. Now we can watch television shows pretty much from any continent, made by any culture, for any culture, in any language. And so we can take that opportunity to make things that were not normal within our households normal. It would be normal to walk in and see a show that's filmed in South Africa, in my home, see something that is filmed in Nigeria in my home, eat some food that is from someone in Ghana. And so, being able to compare and taste and know the difference in jollof rice, for instance, which is always the go-to in the conversation of whose is better, Nigeria or Ghana. So it's just simply opening yourself up. And so I would say those are just a few ways in which you can begin to build that bridge and begin to build the relationships.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Candice, for your insights. Brandon, would you like to chime in?
Sure, I'll just add one more thing on top of that. I want to say, and this is kind of biased, but I'll say it. I think one way that we can work together is church. Um, a lot of us may realize or may not realize the common ancestry or the history that African and African Americans have in church. I mean, they were formed there first over 1600, if not 2000 years ago. And so there is a common tradition, a common ancestry there. So I think there's a lot of opportunities just inside of our worship places to kind of get together, build those relationships that Candice was talking about, and really just learn more and more about each other, engage with each other, build with each other, all in the name of, where we worship. And that spills over into our community involvement, that spills over into everything that we do in our personal lives. And so that might be, sort of an out of the box answer, but I think that's a good one too. It's our worship place, our church, our common ancestry that we share.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Brendan. And I will second that because we definitely are able to build community in our churches and where we worship. Believe it or not, there are a lot of Christians out there. And just being in a community and just knowing that you have your brothers and sisters that you can call on even when you are going through a difficult moment in your life, right? It's not just all about our day-to-day going to work and coming back. Sometimes we'll go through some of those moments that it's just nice to have a shoulder to lean on. It's nice to have someone that you can call, whether a mentor, a friend, a sister, and anybody. So thank you for bringing that aspect. Community is definitely very important, and finding that in a religious environment is even better, I think.
I love that he brought that up because if you recognize our most segregated time in our country is Sunday morning. That's when we purposefully separate. The church that I attend is Ambassadors Worship Center. And there we believe that our church should look like the city. Our church should look like the city that you live in. And, they've done a lot of work and that's what our church looks like. And that is, as Brandon mentioned, our best time to come together is, through faith and through the things that lead us and guide us. So I'm really glad he brought that up. And Brandon, I just have to say, though we've never met, I'm looking behind you at your picture and your wife is my sorority sister.
Yeah, she told me.
That's awesome.
Yes. Very awesome.
That's awesome. So now I have a follow-up question for you guys. How can we ensure that these efforts are inclusive of all voices within our communities, including younger generations and diverse cultural backgrounds? Anyone can take that on.
Well, being My whole thing is being intentional about putting infrastructure together to do these things. I'm a person who believes in that. So I would say, just putting together programming that where both these parties can come together on a regular basis in community around some of the things that they mentioned. Since he mentioned church, having an organized monthly event where these people come together. I mean, that's something that's very doable and very practical. Um, and Candice mentioned some community things that we can do. It's just, you know, putting those things together and kind of creating a plan, a monthly plan to do them, and then kind of putting different themes around them, depending on what if you want it to be where kids, the youth, rather not little kids, but the youth are engaged. I mean, think of ways to bring those collaborations together and things that will attract them, but the African and African American youth together, so we can start exchanging.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ebo. And I was second that by just saying that in a lot of church communities, they have small groups, whether it's for young adults or co-ed groups. They have these groups already that help with things like this. So I feel like if we can try to replicate the same thing that we're doing in our churches, outside of the churches, into the city, what greater impact will we have, right?
Absolutely. I do want to mention, Fidel, it looks like Mr. Clark has joined in, is waiting to be brought in.
Why am I not seeing him? Oh, yes, there he is. There we go. Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Clark. Thank you so much.
Hey, I just been sitting here waiting patiently, enjoying the conversation. But thank you so much. I appreciate you guys asking me to be involved. But if I could, in terms of just that first question, one of the things I think all of this breaking barriers and really trying to be more intentional, I think it starts with your home, every single person on this phone, on this panel, and our communities. We have to be willing to invite people that don't look like us into our world, and be intentional about it. And I really try to, challenge people around me as we become so accustomed and so comfortable with just the same old people being around us. And I think if we're going to build this bridge and build this world and right here in Omaha of different Africans, African Americans, people of color getting to know each other, it only can happen if we dare to step out our comfort zone and invite somebody into your world. When you think about it, and I even ask myself and my friends, I'm like, when the last time you invited an African to your home? Okay, and most of them, they like, well, damn, I haven't. I think it has to start that small of because if the people see us do it, organically, I think it will catch fire and will begin, because the world is very complex. The more we're able to understand and appreciate the differences, not judge, but appreciate, I think we'll be able to build this oneness that we are longing for. So that I just want to as that as my opening statement.
That is awesome. And thank you so much for just giving us that insight. And I will just go on with a brief introduction for you. Mr. Tim Clark is a lifelong Omaha native, educator, and community leader with over 35 years of experience in nonprofit leadership, youth development, and civic engagement. He currently serves as Director of Community Impact and Engagement at Metropolitan Community College, manages Collective Impact Group, LLC, and founded Moving People to Action to promote civic awareness. Known for organizing major cultural events like the Omaha Riverfront Jazz and Blues Festival, he has held key leadership roles with the YMCA, Greater Omaha Chamber, and City of Omaha. A former international performer and widely recognized as the voice of Omaha, Clark continues to inspire through board service, public speaking, and mentorship. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm honored.
Right. Next up, we have April. April, I will address this question to you. How can we create a shared community event platform each year to celebrate both African and African American cultures?
Yes, I think first of all, organizations partnering. Like I'm a strong believer of collaboration. So, like the Urban League of Nebraska and possibly the Midlands African Chamber partnering to do a major event yearly, because both you all have the African market and the Urban League has the African American market, and then maybe bring in Empowerment Network as well. I hope I'm saying this right. I was looking. I always think of themes like is it Umoja? Umoja? How am I saying it?
Umoja.
How is
Umoja.
Umoja Festival. Something like that. I like that. So where our businesses, culture, music, and youth engagement are integrated. So thinking of, I think something like that, where, you have a annual summit with food, music, storytelling, vendor expos, and equity panels and youth forums, something like that. Yeah. So I think those things I think having that yearly, but in collaboration with the organizations that already have the trust of these various groups, collaborating between these 3 organizations to put on, or 2 organizations, however, definitely Urban League of Nebraska and Midlands African Chamber for sure. I mean, that's the African American, and these are coming together to possibly host a event, because you all both have these markets, and then creating themes around talking about issues that our communities are facing and coming up with ways to solve them in unified ways, as well as exchanging our goods. And also the Urban League of Nebraska and the Nebraska Opportunity Exchange, I was thinking about, can serve as conveners by bringing together our vast network of small businesses and community leaders and some of our funders to share in these economic and cultural goals. But I think that's a good way to do it.
Thank you so much, April. And it's interesting you said that, because this forum, we usually have 3 live events like this virtually. And then the last one that we usually do in December is an in-person one, where we celebrate through food and different cultures. The only aspect that we have not added to it is actually having vendors come and doing their expo. And we have done that last year at our holiday party with the Urban League young professionals. So we're already doing some of these things in different ways, but we can definitely make them bigger.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's already there.
Yes, definitely. Let's move on to question number 3. So civic engagement is a powerful tool for shaping our collective future. When we advocate together, we amplify our voice. How can African and African American communities work together to advocate for policies that benefit both groups? Candice.
Thank you. I would say that it definitely takes intentionality. It's pretty easy to come together over a shared goal, but how do you come together and help when it really only impacts the other person, right? Are you that compassionate? Are you able to kind of set your needs aside because you see there's a greater need? And when people can finally realize also, when you're helping someone else during their time, that builds a bridge so that when it's your time, you have some extra support as well. And so the same way we receive, we should give. And I think that when we look at civic engagement, one thing that we really should begin to do a little bit better is to come together and talk through some of these issues. We do it in our own silos. We seem to do these things in a vacuum instead of getting to a space where we can trust one another, where we can build that bond so we can say the things that matter to us, not feel bad. I say one of these statements that came out seemingly this year that's kind of a joke on Facebook, but we use it in my workplace and we take it seriously, and that's, we listen and we don't judge, right? So we use that a lot of times as a joke when someone says something, but I think it's one of the best statements that has come out in a long time. We listen and we don't judge. So learn to do that, because when it comes to civic policy, civic engagement, that's generally a personal matter. It's very emotionally driven. People are very passionate. We don't really know how to give grace when someone is leading and showing their feelings on their sleeve, because it's something that's impacting their home or their families, their children, their workplaces, families that are in other places. And so if we can learn to simply listen to one another, have open dialogue, speak honestly, even when we know, for instance, April just did something that I appreciated very much. She wasn't sure how to say something, and so she asked, but she wasn't afraid to try. And that's even on a live stream. So imagine if we could do that more often, and no one made her feel uncomfortable. No one thought that was odd. This is a word we're unfamiliar with. You told her exactly how to say it. And I think that's exactly how we grow. When it comes to civic engagement, it's the same way. How do you explain to someone an issue that matters to you that doesn't matter to them, or an issue that will impact you but it doesn't impact them? How do you get them to care, especially when it's someone that you feel you don't have a relationship with? I know for the state of Nebraska, a lot of civic engagement has to be done across the aisle, right? So that means someone who doesn't have your typical standard of beliefs. But if we can find one thing we have in common, I always say we can go a long way. So what you feel about, let's say, incarceration, for instance, criminal justice system, we don't see eye to eye on that. But we do see eye to eye on kids and education. Well, let's start there, and then we can get somewhere else. And so I think we need to do the same thing between our own communities. So the African community and the African American community, when it comes to some of these policies as well.
Thank you so much, Candice. It's very interesting you say that. And as I was listening to you, the word that struck out to me first and mostly is trust. Trust, passionate, right? Because there are so many things that people go through, and they have to be able to trust you in order to share that with you. And if they are able to trust you and share that with you, if you are compassionate, you will be able to actually hear them first and then be able to empathize with them. And another thing is, it takes vulnerability for someone to actually open up and share what is deep down within them.
Mm-hmm.
So we all have to be able to just know that we can actually talk about things.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to be vulnerable, because keeping it all within you is not going to help.
No, exactly. And it
As
definitely
much
doesn't help our communities. So
Yes. So yeah, we definitely have to learn to be vulnerable. You have to learn to trust one another and share those things that are very, very true and dear to us. So
yes,
thank you so much. I
thank
appreciate
you.
that. So my follow-up question will be, or before we do that, does anybody else want to chime in or add anything to that?
Um, I wanted to probably mention one thing. I was just, in addition to the wonderful input Candice just stated, and maybe I'm just probably re-emphasizing it, but I just want to mention that, I just think we need to host more community conversations tied to economic issues, and partner with culturally competent messengers, such as pastors, business owners, and even barbershop and salon owners, where people congregate a lot, and use this economic empowerment programming, such as the Nebraska Opportunity Exchange. You all know I'm going to put that in there, to show people how policy directly impacts their ability to access contracts and capital and things like that. We need to use, these kind of non-traditional platforms to make sure people understand those things. So that's where I want to.
Thank you. It's interesting you say that, because a lot happens in salons and barbershops. I know that because I am a business owner. I own a beauty salon and spa. So you will be surprised the information that women share with me when they are sitting in my chair or when they're on the bed and I'm performing facials on them. So yes, there's a lot that can be done, using those outlets. So thank you for bringing that up. My follow-up question is, what are some specific policy areas where African immigrants and African Americans can find common ground to make the most impact?
I think starting with business and economic development, that's something that we can somewhat remove race from, right? We can find the issues that are heavily race-based, whether that's access to capital or some of the other resources. But there are some issues in particular, whether it's around tax policy, tax incentives, growing your small business, organizations that are available. That's a common ground. And those items will impact everyone around you. That impacts your family. That impacts if you can purchase a home or not. That impacts, just your simple financial situation. So I always think that business is one easy way to go about starting conversation, because who doesn't either have someone in their family or within their friend group that's either owning a business, looking to start or own a business, or has in the past. So that means we can all add value. And I think one thing that we miss out on, a missed opportunity in Omaha often, seems to be talking with individuals who had a business and they no longer have that business. And the reason I say that is because as important as it is for us to know what to do right, what to do well, it's equally as important for us to know what potholes we can miss. What things would you suggest we do differently? And I think oftentimes we miss that opportunity to talk with our individuals who either had a storefront or had a brick and mortar or even had an online business and went out of business. How can you help guide the next generation? That's a common ground that we can talk without it necessarily always having to be emotionally driven, which sometimes causes the rift.
Thank you so much, Candice. And I'm just going to dive right into the next question. What specific actions can we take to increase voter participation and civic engagement in our communities before the next election? And I'll direct this question to Mr. Khan.
Yeah, you broke up a little bit. Can you kind of repeat the question, please?
Sure, definitely. What specific actions can we take to increase voter participation and civic engagement in our communities before the next election?
Okay. So I think part of it is it's got to start, that civic engagement has to start at home. And so I think what we do in our family and our immediate family is we make sure our brothers, sisters, cousins, and are registered to vote and have a voting plan and help them remove barriers, because some of my nieces and nephews, it's like, hey, where's my voting place? So it's educational, increase awareness of how to. And so it starts at home and starts with your community. But I think it would be good if both African Americans and Africans can unite, so people can see a united front. There's and the only way you get rid of some of this, division. People got to see it. We're visual people. And so if they never see activities and initiatives that's done by Africans and African Americans, we're playing to that notion that, there's a division, they don't get along, and they feel a certain way about each other and all those kind of things. We need to, in this case of answering that question, people need to see us collectively do something together to promote voter registration, to promote people getting out to vote, and do it together so they can see it.
Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to comment on that before we move on? No? Okay. Yeah, that's very important. Oh, yep. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, we have at the Urban League of Nebraska, they have a lot of voter registration drives. So definitely participating in those things. And again, what I mentioned before, partnering with barbershop salons and the churches to deliver digestible civic content, okay, and connect policy to everyday impact, jobs, contracts, healthcare, and housing, but just a lot of education. And I completely agree with Tim Clark, starting in your home and making sure everybody is registered to vote, or directing everybody we know in the community to places where we know there are registration drives, where there are people who will walk you through. Urban League of Nebraska certainly being one of those places. So.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Thank you so much for your input, April. And yes, in our African culture, we always say it always starts at home. Everything that you do starts at home. The way you talk to each other, the way you treat each other, that's exactly what the younger generation copies, and that's exactly what they're going to project outside. So we have to be the ones that show them the right way. We have to do it so they can see it, because they're only going to mirror and mimic exactly what they see at home. So yes, thank you so much, Clark, Mr. Clark, and April also for your input. Now we're going to move on to education and youth empowerment. Education and youth empowerment are foundationals to the long-term success of our communities, as we all know. What are three practical ways African and African American parents can help their children succeed in education and career development? Ola, Brendan, I think this is your area.
Yeah, I love this question. I absolutely love this question. I think the first way is to normalize excellence. Normalize excellence. That means celebrating their academic achievements just like we celebrate their athletic. Underscore what they're doing in school, how important it is, and making sure it's not just, oh, I got a new pair of Jordans because I finally got better than a C. No, you got an A and you should always get an A. Continue to get A's. That's what we expect out of you. Normalize excellence as their standard way to approach education in the home, I think is absolutely essential. So parents just to push the fact that, hey, let's get you the best grades possible and let's help you get the best grades possible and the best education possible. I think it's important to be a family that reads together often. I watch my wife all the time. She's actually a homeschool mom. And everyone can't homeschool, but she sits there and ever since they were really tiny, just read to them. And as they got older and began to read themselves, just sitting there reading, having dedicated times to read, just read, read, read all the time. I think the studies show that, kids that start reading and read often, they have this cognitive, social, emotional development that is above and beyond. And then it's also tied to their long-term academic success. So I think reading is essential. I think if you look at a lot of the great leaders in this country, a lot of the great African American leaders and things and people that, did really important things in our community, in our country, they were avid readers. Um, and again, I think homeschooling is great, and not everyone can do it, but I think every parent can be involved. So I think it's important to just be involved in their education. Some people may think, well, education is not my thing. Well, make it your thing. Teaching is not my thing. That's okay. You don't have to be great at it, but you can be involved. I don't necessarily think we can just trust our education system to properly educate our African American kids. So I think one of the biggest things is to be super involved and expose them early. Be their number one cheerleader. Bring your kids to college campuses, career fairs. Let them shadow professionals and volunteers in positions they may be interested in. You know, be very involved in what grades they're getting, showing up for all the parent-teacher conference, showing up for every single educational activity. Just be their number one cheerleader, not necessarily in just sports events, but also academically. And then just to continue to plan for the future. I think planning for the future is key, and I think there's a way we can even bridge faith and future. We can teach our kids to pray and plan for their future and understand that they're ultimately, in my view, working for an audience of one and glorifying one, and that's God Himself. And if they have that in mind, and that God has a particular purpose and plan for their lives, I think if you combine all those things together, you have a really good start for really helping your child succeed in education and career and in life.
Thank you so much for the insights, Brandon. Hola.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I would like to say first that I'm not a parent yet, right? But yes, I try to be one very soon. Meanwhile, I'm very active when it comes to mentorship, like of the young ones, which is quite great. So for me, I'm coming from three perspectives, right? In the sense that whether it's parents or even the guardians, you have to like be three things in the life of the children. Like maybe simultaneous intervals, and that's like being a mentor, being a coach, and being a sponsor, right? That kind of thing, all at once. Sometimes it might be like a mentor at some point of their life. As a mentor, what you are doing basically is not to probably coach them or get this data at that point, but it's more like sharing your own story, right? Oh, back then, this was why, maybe for example, you as a parent, you never went to college or it was difficult for you to like go to college, right? And right now there are like opportunities for them and they don't want to take advantage of it. So you want them to like know the reason why, oh, do this. even for me to not go to college, right? See what I've achieved. Imagine if you go to college, what you can achieve, that kind of thing, right? Or like concentrate more on what you are doing in the college. That's like one area. Then being a coach as well. Academic excellence is very important, right? Because you want to make sure that they become someone good in life, someone better in life. So I would say trying to like make sure you are affirming their excellence, affirming their success, right? And also like trying to like celebrate their small wins. That's very important. And I think as a coach, you can do that very well. And being a sponsor, um, early in their life, right? You want to make sure that if there are opportunities, you connect them to those opportunities, right? I know, for example, in the Omar area, there are a lot of like mentorship programs that some people might not be aware of. There's like the 100 Black Men of Omar, right? There's like the Chamber of Commerce, that's the Omar Chamber, the Grooming Academy, and lots of stuff's happening. So I think just early on, trying to like bring these opportunities to them, that's actually going to help them in their life. You might just be wondering that, oh, by the time they are done with college, they have like different work experience, right? And that sets them on a good path, right? Even to get something better. So that would just be something I like to add. So being that few things at a time or at interval. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, for sharing your insights. I love both of your different perspectives and how parents can really help their children, the youth, become great leaders in our community. I would also like to add that coming from an African background, I've lived here very, very many years, about 27, 28 years now. But one thing that I continue to see in our African community is that most African parents are not preparing their youth for better opportunities,
Mm.
such as internship opportunities. African parents, for the most part, are focused on education. You will study. If you don't get an A in my family, you have failed. Literally. If you come home with anything less than an A, you have failed. That's my mother's mentality. But again, based on some of our parents' own educational background, like Ola has mentioned, some of them did not go to college. So they don't know that. They don't know the things that students have to do in high school to prepare themselves to go to college and to prepare them to succeed. So I always talk about make sure that your children have some internship opportunities. They don't have to start college first before they start looking for internship opportunities. Have them start doing that as soon as they are either sophomore or junior in high school. That will give them some work experience. It will train them while they are doing those internship. They'll also meet people who are able to mentor them. It's very, very important. School is great, and you can have all straight A's, you can have the best GPA. But by the time you finish high school or college and you don't have any work experience, any job related experience, there's only so much you can do because who's ready to hire you with your degree if you don't have any experience at all? So those things are very, very important. That's one thing that I continue to stress out to African parents and African immigrants. Period. Doesn't matter where you're from, or even African Americans, because some people, because they haven't done it, they don't know it, they don't know how to pass that on.
Mm.
So that's my own take on that. It's very important for our young ones to start, acquiring those skills early on, because it's only going to strengthen them and better them as an individual. We don't want them to become adults before they're graduating from college and they're still seeking internship opportunities. I'm like, after you put all that money into college, you want to start making some real money, right? So that's what I have to add to that. Let's move right along.
I have a little something to add to that. Just kind of, listening, I got really excited with what Brandon said because I think he hit the nail on the head. And then Olan, he just brought it on home. And Fidel, you just took it to another level, and that's just exposure. What helps our kids succeed is exposure and experience, right? So we talk about coaching, we talk about mentoring, that exposes them to something different. Olan mentioned 100 Black Men as an organization. And I know their mantra, I may have it a little bit off, but it stems around if they can see it, they can be it. And so with my children, in our home, and what my parents even did with me was travel opportunities. And we may not always be able to travel physically by leaving, right? But I used to travel in books. We have a young man in our community who created an app called Finally Voyage. It gives you the opportunity to literally sit in your home, Go on your app, take a journey with a tour guide in another country, right? It could be a country in Africa, it could be a country anywhere. You can do it in the classroom. But I always feel like when you travel, you see other cultures, you find out about other foods, whether you get to taste it or you're watching the Food Network, you want to try it at your home. That makes you want to do more, be better, excel academically so that you can go try these things out later in your own life or so that you can get back there. But I always think that travel is one of the greatest gifts that children and young people can have to either celebrate their excellence in school or get them to achieve higher in their academic goals and excellence so they can see more, they want to do more, and we already know how you can get there. You do great academically, it opens up the world to you without opening up your pocketbook.
Thank you so much, Candice. I couldn't have said it any better. If you can see it, you can be it. I love that. Thank you. Now let's dive into corporate leadership and career growth. Let's now shift a little bit where representation and mentorship and access are crucial. What are three key skills young Black professionals need to succeed in corporate America today? And how can community leaders help them acquire those skills? April or Candice, any one of you?
I could lead with this one. We need negotiation skills. We need to be able to say, this is my worth, this is my value, and I'm not taking the position until I get to that point. Not saying we're not going to work to that point, but for some of these skill jobs, they will pay you what you accept. And so that impacts you later. That impacts your retirement. That impacts your next job because they're going to ask, what were you making at your last job, your last role or position? And so it has a compounding effect. So negotiation skills are really important. The ability to hear the word no, I think, would be second. I think one of the greatest gifts my parents gave to me was my very first job when I was 15. They allowed me to work at a telemarketing office instead of the grocery store because those were the two options. And in telemarketing, you're going to hear no. You're going to hear it constantly. I remember I can still hear my supervisor in my ear saying, you got to be up for the no's so you can be up for the yeses. And they would literally have a mirror there. So you could still smile when you hear no. That's been the greatest impact of my life today because I don't mind if you tell me no. Only thing I say is, tell me fast so I can get on. Go slow roll me. I'm okay with no. I've heard it before. It helps me. It gives me motivation to get to my yes, right? And the yes is more exciting. But I think sometimes our children haven't heard no enough, or they haven't been through these experiences where they didn't immediately win. And so they don't know how to take that. They don't know how to handle it when they're passed up for a promotion. They don't know what they need to do differently in the workplace, right? So I think those are some of the things there. And I also think communication skills. You have to be able to communicate, very well. You need to be able to take feedback. You need to be able to give open and honest feedback and dialogue. And you need to be able to say when you want to find out, how do I get to the next level? We talk about often, especially at my church, is not just being an entrepreneur, but being an intrapreneur. And so being an intrapreneur when you're working for an organization, and how can you be innovative? How can you help that company get to the next level, which helps you get to the next level? And how do you say, what is it I can do in my job? What can I improve upon that can get me to the next level? Or where are the gaps that you feel that you need filled so that I can help that? But also just a little bit more of the grind and hustle, not too much. We have to keep some balance with rest, but being able to say, I can take on a couple extra hours. I recognize, I may not get any extra pay for it right now, but I know it's going to pay off in the long run. And so just having those skills and abilities, I think, are some that we need to continue to teach our children, train our children. It's okay to hear no every now and then, and it's okay to say no also.
Thank you so much for saying that, Candice. It's interesting. Being able to say no and being able to accept a no. Those are two things that if you can master, your life will be so much easier, whether as an adult or a young adult, because it's not everything that you ask for in this world that you're going to get, and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. Like we always say this proverb, like whatever does not kill you, only makes you stronger, right? That's it. I love it. And those negotiation skills, because you can be offered a job, you're excited, I applied for this job, I got it. And then they offer you a pay and you're like, this is not actually what I was expecting. But sometimes you don't have the courage to negotiate. Whenever I offer a position to anybody in my role, I'm always ready for them to negotiate, because that's what I know, that's what I do. And I will pause and I'll say, do you have anything else to say or would you like to counter? I always give them that opportunity. Some people will say yes, some people will say no. I can only go off of what you said, right? I cannot force, a negotiation on you, but I'm ready for that because
Yeah.
that's what people usually do. And that is what I
Absolutely.
expect people to do.
Mhm.
So thank you for just shining light on that.
Yes.
We only have about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we go through some of these questions. So, how can corporate professionals from both communities mentor at least 5 young Black professionals each year to improve career investment opportunities in our communities? Anybody?
I can jump in first. I think the first thing, something April said earlier, was just being intentional. So intentionality. Um, want to encourage all of us to treat mentorship as like a ministry, if you will, or a calling, not just a checkbox. Not, I mentored these people, I add that to my resume. Not just a potential good news story, but, you know, involving people with a real passion for mentorship, a real passion for passing down that information and elevating other people, passing down the wisdom that they know. Intentional to the point that you're building your calendar around how you can be a mentor, not just trying to fit it into your busy schedule, right? You're being super intentional. And I think that's one of the ways that we can do that if we just start being intentional and acting with our passion and not necessarily, always checkbox. Sometimes we have a tendency to say, okay, I did this, but really be passionate about it. Another thing that was mentioned earlier, and I'll mention it again, is just structured models, regular cadence, quarterly meetups, career shadowing, reverse mentoring. Reverse mentoring is, acknowledging that the mentors can learn from the mentees too. Just really developing those relationships and making the meetings and the gatherings a regular cadence. It's so easy to get busy with your schedule and have great intentions, even if you are passionate and not being able to make the time. But if you set up that regular cadence, I think then it won't fall off. And I think the last thing I'll say is just partnerships or joint initiatives with churches and youth ministries. Um, and so it's another bias thing that I'll add in, obviously, as a youth and young adult pastor. But I think, inside of our churches, inside of our organizations, we have a ton of professionals with a lot of experience and a lot of information and knowledge to pass down. And we just need to kind of get ourselves together, gather our resources, and mentor those people. For instance, in my church alone, there's so many people, attorneys, lawyers, politicians. And if we just set up some sort of forum, some sort of event where we can congregate those people together to pour down information into those young professionals, it'll be great. Here in June, we have a career fair day. It's more structured for youth. But even if we do something like that with our young adults, our kids in high school and college, we gather all of, the different people that are killing it in their professions and just are super intentional about pouring that information down in actual events and promoting those well, then I think we'll have a lot greater chance of not only mentoring, 5 young Black professionals each year, but making a huge impact in their lives.
Yeah. Um,
Thank you so much, Brandon. Did you want to add anything, April?
Yes. I mean, like I always say, we all are in sync here. So we're saying I was definitely in agreement with what Brandon is saying here. And I like to tie it in, to very practical matters as well as to what the Urban League and the NOE is doing. So I have here at the Urban League of Nebraska and through the Nebraska Opportunity Exchange, we, as I said before, we believe in intentional relationship building is key. So corporate professionals can mentor by, like he mentioned, offering structured group mentoring, programs providing job shadowing opportunities and hosting industry-specific workshops that align with real career pathways. These are things that we can build out very practical terms very quickly. And furthermore, our work at the Nebraska Opportunity Exchange, we already integrate mentorship into procurement and capital access by connecting small business owners with bankers, procurement officers, and experienced entrepreneurs, many of whom are Black professionals paying it forward. So those basically leveraging those partnerships that we create, corporate partnerships, connecting them with Black professionals and putting them in mentorship pathways. But I think we need to track the outcomes to make sure that these people are getting what they need. Because some of this mentorship is sometimes it can be a bit sporadic. So we want to make sure that things are being followed through, and we track if these 5 Black professionals are getting what they need and they're meeting the objectives of said mentorship based on the goals that they set at the beginning. We do need to track those things so we can make sure our outcome is coming out.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention 3 things. One that is currently in place and 2 opportunities. So Mr. John Jackson, who runs the Black Student Leadership Council, has African American Professionals Day. So it's African and African American Professionals Day. Every year it's moved to October. It's a huge event, and it's the only event for our youth where all of the professionals, whether it's those that are working for corporations, such as Union Pacific, ConAgra, CHI, the medical professions, or even like Home Team Model Sales or other small business entrepreneurs are there for the youth to be involved with, to see. It's a much more relaxed environment. If they have resumes, that's great. If not, they can learn of other opportunities. And so I think we all should definitely be involved with that, with African American Professionals Day that's already set up. But then there's 2 opportunities that I have hated that we don't have here in Omaha. So I'm actually from South Florida. And in South Florida, one thing that they do big that they do here, but they seem to keep doing the same thing, is our field trips. So when my first daughter was growing up here, I kept wondering, like, why do they keep taking her to the zoo? Every year our field trip goes to the zoo. And not that our zoo isn't great. We know it's great. It's ranked as the top zoo. However, there's other opportunities to involve them with those in corporate America.
Yeah.
In South Florida, when I was younger, we were taking tours to industry. We were taking tours to corporations. We were going to different food distributors or, food makers, and the kids get to taste it and they get to see, or you get to sit in on a board meeting, or these are the different things that, I had an opportunity to be involved in when I was younger. You were going downtown, you were going to the large glass buildings, and that was a field trip, right? It was going to someone's job. They really looked at and used the, take your child to work day. I don't know what happened to that. I don't know where that went, but I sure wish, it had an opportunity to come back. I think that's something pretty great. And then the third thing is, in South Florida, when I was in school, we had something called a Winter Circle. And it was done just by the local businesses. And it was a way of celebrating kids doing well in school. And at the end of the quarter or semester, you would get this circle that was almost like cardboard, thicker paper, whatever it was. And you could tear off a corner, and each little corner had something for a business you could go to and get something for free. So whether it was a taco from Taco Bell, one of the personal sized pizzas from Pizza Hut, if it was a discount somewhere for one of the game places. And so those business owners intentionally supported our youth. They intentionally supported the kids of the community. And I wish that we had a way here of connecting the 2, whether it's through the chambers, all of the chambers together, working together, or whether it's just the business community coming and saying, hey, this is what my company's willing to give for students that achieve, a B or greater, or, a C or greater, or whatever that change may be. This is what we want to do to celebrate the kids who went from a D to a B. Like, we have to have ways to help incentivize our kids. I always think it's funny how we as adults love to be incentivized with things, right? If I get a little bit more money, I'll do a little bit more work, so if that's what they're going into, what is wrong with having to incentivize them in their goals and their efforts? You do a little bit better, you get a little bit more. And no, it does not always have to be tied to something monetary, but it definitely doesn't hurt to excite them with things that are at the mall. You get a chance to go to Five Below and pick out 2 items or whatever it might be. But I think that that's something we can do better on here in Nebraska.
Thank you so much, Candice. And that's definitely very important. I'm glad you mentioned the field trip. I don't have any children per se, but that is so true. The only place that take these kids is a zoo. I lived in Maryland almost 18 years before moving to Omaha. I went to middle school in Maryland, and I just attended 8th grade when I first came to the U.S. But I can tell you, we had at least 4 or 5 different field trips in 1 year. But here, the zoo.
It's the zoo. And it's like, you can go to the news station. You can take them to a radio station. There's so many things you can expose our children to, and we just don't take advantage.
Yeah, we can do better. Nebraska can definitely do better as far as the zoo is concerned.
I think
Henry Dorley is going to be upset with us after this call. We love you, Henry Dorley. We love you.
Did you have something to add, Orla?
Yeah, I said I agree with that as well. I think to an extent there is like a bit of a foundation, like a structure, but we just need to like bring the collaboration. I know for the Black Student Leadership Council that you made mention of, I heard that last year they kind of did like some free trips to some places, right? So I think just like you made mention of like trying to like collaborate with people already existing and trying to see that they have like some structured programs, right? Like if it's every year, trying to like make sure they go for free trip every year, like it's something that is so certain that is going to happen. I think that would actually help as well. So I just want to like chime that in, like there might be like some structures already, but how do we just collaborate and make sure that this actually happens?
Thank you. It's nice to say that because Mark does partner with the Black Leadership Council. We do our SURAP events with them. So that's something that I can definitely say that we're all trying, but we need to do
Yes.
more so that there are more of those types of programs happening.
Mhm.
So that these youth are able to get more out of just their high school experience. It's not just about going to school every day, but they should be going to these different facilities, right? These different businesses, organizations, so they can actually see and experience the hands-on, whether it's shadowing is a day or two shadowing, or
Yeah.
a week or whatever it is, so that they have an idea what do they want to do by the time they hit their junior or senior year.
Or what
That's
they don't want to do, is
yes,
even important. And I wish it could be
part.
for the masses. My daughter happens to attend Nelson Mandela. They do a great job of field trips. They go to the Holland, they go to, all of the different opportunities we have downtown. But our school system as a whole, our public school system as a whole, the kids don't always get those opportunities. And so I just feel like that alone would change our city.
Absolutely. We're almost at the end here, but I have one last question. What advice can older generations give younger African and African American professionals to navigate workplace challenges and leadership roles? I think that's going to be our last question of the evening. Who wants to take that way?
I think it'll be my last comment of the evening since we're wrapping up. One of the wisest things I was taught and told that I'm still working on is there is a benefit to the pause. When you're in the workplace, when you're having a conversation, especially when it's intense or heated, don't lose your job, right? Um, don't make a permanent decision based on a temporary situation. So learn to pause, learn to breathe, learn to reset, and then respond, or learn to come back at a different time or the next day. To don't simply react. And I think for our older, generation, which has become me for the younger kids, and I still take advice and wisdom from those older than me. But that's something that we, definitely need to teach, especially in the workplace, is just breathe, pause, reset, and come back to it. You might handle it a little bit differently. You might have the same feelings, but your response, reaction, words might not be quite as sharp.
Thank you so much, Candice. That is definitely a great insight because we're all different. We all have different temperaments. And just being able to know who you are and know how you react to things will help you navigate those challenges as they arise. If you know you're someone that's hot tempered and everything just explodes whenever you're upset, well, then it's best for you to just, take a step away, go for a walk, take some time off. Take time to just digest the situation, think about it, and then come back. And now you're ready to actually have, an adult conversation
Absolutely.
versus anything else that could have happened prior when, all your emotions and everything is up in the air.
Yes.
So, yes, thank you so much
Thank you.
for bringing that up. Anybody else?
I want to add just a couple of things. I think we all know this, but one of the things the advice I would give is just, again, to normalize excellence. I think we all know that based on our own ethnicity, we have to work 10 times harder than anyone else around us to achieve those same things. So just normalizing working hard, but also understanding that challenges is not the point of if they arrive, that they will arrive. And so my statement might be controversial here, and this might be more pastoral than advice from an older generation, but I think we need to understand our worth, our inherent value is not inside of a particular position or even a profession or a particular job. That's not what our identity is based on. Our identity is based on who God created us to be. And so I think it's important that we don't confuse the two, because one of those can go away, but the other can't, right? And so even if we face challenges that push us outside of where we think we're supposed to be, just having that faith to know that God has a purpose for our lives and trusting in His plan, I think is very important when we do face challenges. Especially if our identity is tied to those particular jobs. When we encounter challenges, we tend to take them more to heart than we should and confuse our identity with God's purpose for our lives.
Thank you so much, Brendan. That's a nice way for us to close and wrap up. I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists for your powerful insights and to everyone who joined us for this conversation. Today's dialogue reinforced that while our histories may be diverse, our futures are intertwined, whether it's through shared advocacy, intergenerational mentorship, or collaborative celebration. We do have the tools and the responsibility to build stronger bridges across the Black diaspora. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or any messages?
Just a thank you for having us and thank you for leading this conversation.
Thank you all so much for joining me once again. And thank you for everyone who is involved. Have a great day. And we look forward to seeing you at our future events. Let us remember, we are one, not just in name, but in purpose, progress, and people. Thank you. And we look forward to continuing this journey together. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.